Welcome back to the Let's Talk Vibes podcast, where we speak soul contracts, illuminating the path to higher understanding. We're your hosts, Lauren and Yiannah, and this week we are joined by a fellow soul contract practitioner, also massage therapist, Leigh Lamitola. Welcome, Leigh.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for having me.
We're so excited to have you here, Leigh, to talk about our 4-4 deep dive. So, where do you have the fours in your chart?
I have a 4 placement in my physical karma.
Oh, interesting. I have it
Mm.
as physical talent. So we have that nice little karmic lock there, which is like a relationship term in terms of how charts work together. But it
Mhm.
basically means that Leigh and I, in terms of our relationship, I'm energetically passing to her the positive frequencies and vibrations of that four energy, that talent energy. So it's a very nice,
Received.
yes, it's a very nice aspect to have in relationships with people. And Yiannah, where do you have fours in your chart?
I have them in not my birth name, but they've kind of been, they were in my married name, my optimized name. So literally like every version of my name except my birth name, and they're just
Mhm.
scattered. So I've got some 4-4, some 13-4, some 22-4s.
And do you
So
have them mostly in karma, talent, goals, a
scattered.
mix?
It's a
A
mix.
mix.
It's a mix. Yeah.
For me, it's interesting because in every variation of my name, the four is always in talent. So in my birth name, it's the 4-4 is in physical talent. In my common use name from birth, it's a 13-4 that's in spiritual talent. And in my current optimized name, the 22-4 is in physical talent as well. So I only have talent
Mm.
fours, but then I only have like karmic three. So I feel like they balance each other out.
Well,
Yeah.
plus, as we always talk about, regardless of that placement, you're still going to feel all most of the aspects anyway, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
So, because my talent threes, that
Mm-hmm.
self-worth piece, I didn't realize was an issue for me until I did divine healing, where I was like, oh, wait a minute. Maybe there is something there where I always thought like I excelled in that, but you still feel that you can still feel that challenge aspect regardless of the placement. So that's so important. I know that's something I always drive home because I see it so much in the work that we do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's true. And I can really relate to that, which for myself, because I have that spiritual karma 3-3 from my common use name, and I have a 12-3 in my soul destiny, I can really relate to that karmic aspect of the three. And something that the threes and the fours have in common is this unworthiness and that feeling of unworthiness and how your self worth kind of can create become a money block, right? How that is connected then into that financial aspect. And so for me, what I kind of feel like happens is because I have that karmic three experience, that is sort of what manifests those challenges of the karmic four. So it's like those are the aspects of the four, the challenges of the four that I then see in my life are the where there are the parallels, because I think the one kind of brings it out of the other. Where it's not to say I don't have any of the selfishness, which we're going to be getting into all of these challenges of the four. And one of them is the selfishness. And I feel like for me, I felt that early in life, right? I'm an only child, I have Aries energy, but I feel like that has not been something that is this overarching lesson and challenge for me in my life. Like, sure, I experienced that, but like really navigated through that a lot more quickly. Whereas that feeling of the worthiness is such a bigger emphasis and point for me. And the other aspect is the trust. And this is such a huge aspect of that four. So it's like those are the areas for me. And again, I think the trust aspect is very much connected into the worth aspect. So do y'all want to go into a little bit more about that trust of the four?
You want to take us in, Lee?
Sure. Yeah, that theme shows up frequently in my life. And each year that, each birth year that I'm experiencing is like I really anchor into trusting. I would say over the past 5 years, especially because my life pivoted in a way that I never imagined. And so every alignment, every spiritual gift allowed me to really trust what was happening, even if I didn't know the next piece. And so I feel like I've done some really solid work around learning to trust, although it continues to show up and surprise me often. just like even looking at, I love the symbolism of the frequency number. So like the high points and then experiencing the lows and knowing that, yeah, the sun's going to rise again. Just ride this out and make sure that I stay in a high vibration or the best that I can to rise back up and be in that flow state.
And so what you're exemplifying is that trust really is faith, having faith. And the fours are all about taking leaps of faith. And in order to do that, you have to have trust in the universe. You have to have trust that source will always provide for you, right? Whatever that looks like. I always go back to any time like I've had periods in my life where like something has gone wrong, or I find myself in a situation where I'm like, how did I get here? I always go back to, has God always provided for you? Yes. Has God always given you what you needed? Yes. So then what are you worried about? And I will say, like you, the last 2 years from your, less than 2 years, the last year and a half for me have been giant leaps of faith. And maybe because I was also 40 years old, and that's that 4 year, right? But for me, it was one of those where I had to just surrender and go, God always shows up for me the way I need things to show up. Not in the exact way, but I always get what I need. And so I chose to walk away from a business that provided very well for me. I had no problems. Like it was the thing I was going to do forever. And then I woke up one day and I was like, I felt, nope, you're done. And then not only are you done, you also don't know what's coming next. And you just have to be done with this thing that provides for you every week and go into something completely blind. So that blind faith has been such a huge component for me the last year and a half. And it has done it has produced magic in my life. So I am forever grateful, right? Which is part of that gratitude. But that trust, if you don't have that, if you're missing that piece where you can't trust in yourself or source or others or anything like that, you can get really stuck in this frequency, right? Because you're also a manifester. The fours are manifestors. And so if you lack trust, you're always going to think that nothing's ever going to work out for you. And that stinking thinking is going to create that exact reality. And so when you have that trust and that faith, and you're like, I know I'll be provided for, I know I have everything I need, I know things will work out, then your life starts showing up with you having everything you need and everything working out. And so your thoughts are everything, so much just as like that trust factor. And they go so much hand in hand. It's wild.
Yeah. And I think exactly what you're talking about is so key with the four in the story that you told of I took the leap, I didn't know what was coming next. That's so common with these fours where you're just taking one step at a time. And the analogy that I have had, because I'm currently in the 4 year, right? I'm 31. And so I've definitely been in this energy a lot. And it's that feeling so often of, it's kind of like it's very, very foggy. So you can see the step that you're on, but sometimes you're literally taking the step and you are just trusting that your foot is going to land on another step and not
Correct.
into the water. Yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't that the best feeling ever?
Yeah. Well, the thing that I love, and again, part of the visual that I've had throughout this year is that you end up sometimes in these moments of then a little bit more of the plan might get revealed to you, or the way that I've said it, it's like I know where I want to go, I just don't know how you're going to get there, I don't understand. And then you have these moments of kind of maybe downloads or whatever it is, your things are starting to come together, and right, that's very for energy, it's flowing in, the people are showing up, the opportunities are showing up, you couldn't have foreseen them, you didn't know where it was going to come from, but they show up. And it's kind of like this moment of like a little bit of the fog, like a little bit of wind came in, it blew some of the fog away. Now you can see 3 steps ahead. You're like, okay, I knew I was going to get to that 5th step. And now I can actually see the 2 to 3 steps ahead of how I'm going to get there. And it's like, okay, that faith and that trust and that patience is being rewarded. And maybe I still need to be a little patient because I'm not there yet. I still need to take these steps, but I can see that it's coming.
And what you're doing is you're building this really solid foundation with source. And so the more solid that foundation is, then each step you're taking, I'm going to land this. It's going to be just fine. Don't know what it looks like, where it's going to lead me, how I'm going to get there. I just know that if I just keep walking this path of faith, everything will be okay. And so that is just such a beautiful example. I love that you're going through your 4-year. I loved my 4-year, as crazy and scary as it seemed. It was also such a blessing, right? Because when you step into that and you're consciously aware of, okay, don't freak out. I don't know what's coming next. I don't know where my income's coming. I don't know what my next career is. I don't know nothing. That's going to be really scary. But stepping in that faith kind of takes all of that away, and you're like, okay, I'm not going to worry about it because I've always been provided for. And then you see how it shows up for you.
And I can't help seeing, this sort of juxtaposition with the 6, right? The 6 that until they know exactly what that next step is going to be and exactly how it's all going to take step, they don't want to move from that step that they're on, right? They're like, here I am on my stone. It's foggy. What do you mean? Just take a step. What are you talking about? Whereas the 4s, now again, it depends where you are with the energy, of course, right? Because if you're still in a maybe where that's a little bit more of a challenge, you might have that same feeling as the 6. What do you mean? Just take a step. But the talent of the 4, when you are in that place of trust, it's just like, blindfold me. I don't care. I'm stepping forward.
Yeah, I think for me, it always comes from stay true to my heart. And when I'm in that space of heart aligned work or relationships or, whatever it might be in life, and I'm not trying, it's like surrendering to the process, then it drops in. And then the next breadcrumb is aligned and you just go, oh, follow that one, follow that one. And it's like, it is that blissful flow state, and it feels so right. And so I'm always reminded that I don't have to force anything. And if I am trying to force something, it's time to back off and move back into my heart space and just recenter.
Yeah. And
I love
that
that.
surrender word is so key because, right, the 4, think about the 13-4, this very feminine energy. It so much is about just sitting back and being able to receive and not trying to action it forward when you don't know what's coming next, just allowing it to unfold. And, again, I think when you have never lived your life that way, that is really hard to do. And I recognize that. And I think where the 4s maybe have a little bit of an advantage is that, it represents the direction of east, things flowing into your life. They've had those things show up. They've just had that money appear kind of when they needed it. They've had that person who just had a contact who ended up getting them a job, right when they needed it. It's like you've had it happen enough that that even though you don't know who or what is coming, you know that you can trust that something will come. But that's really hard to do when you've never experienced that happening for you in your life before. It's like, what do you mean? It just shows up. What are you talking about? I've never experienced that. And so I understand if you are someone you feel like you've never experienced that before, it is so hard to just trust and believe. But maybe think back. Has that ever happened and you weren't really thinking about it in that way? It probably already has. And again, with those 4s, we're just really lucky that that happens for us repeatedly in our lives.
Now, I want to go back to, because we talked about it a little bit, just the self-worth piece,
Yes.
right? That's a huge component. And so, yes, that self-worth also shows up in the 3 frequency and the 8 frequency, like it lives out there. But because the 4 is all about being able to receive, right? It's tied to that abundance. And it's not just financial, it's in every aspect. But it's, if you don't feel worthy, how can you be open to receiving? If you don't feel like you are worth everything in life, then you're energetically putting out there, I am not worth this beautiful salary that I need, and this beautiful home that I want to own, and, this beautiful family and friends and love in my life. And so that can sometimes show up where I've actually seen it with clients where that selfish aspect comes in, right? And it's, well, why do they have and I don't have? So it's that glass half empty. And so the way I've seen it played out, and I've actually been in a situation with a really, really good friend of mine, and something came my way, and something that she was working at for a long time. And then when I kind of went into it, it came really fast for me. And instead of the good for you, girlfriend, like you got it together, it worked out for you, it was immediate. Well, but why was it so easy? And, did you skip some steps? She was trying to find the flaw in the situation because in her mind, she took all these years to create something. And when somebody else came in and did the same thing in a very quick time frame, it was very much well, I had to work at it for years. You should also have to work at it for years. It wasn't the love and gratitude and joy for the other person. And I remember at that time, I was just learning about these frequencies. And I remember it sitting in her karmic placement and going, oh, that's what it is. You can't be happy for me, but it's not because of me. It's because this frequency can bring in that, well, if I can't have it, you shouldn't be able to have it either. That's selfishness. Or I have it, doesn't mean you should have it. But the reality and the beauty of this frequency is we live in an abundant world where you can have and I can have and you can have and everybody can have all the abundance, and there's still enough for everybody. Right? I mean, no matter what it is, there's a million chiropractors, a million teachers, a million people like doing the same thing. It doesn't mean that you also can't do it. Right? Your success does not take away from my success, and my success does not take away from your success. And I think part of this frequency, I believe, wants you to sit in that joy for others, but that joy for yourself too. Like, you succeeded in this, good for you. I wish you nothing but the best, because I know that I can have that too. And it doesn't take away from me. I remember years ago, I was the last of the cousins in my family to be married or engaged or whatever. And then when it was just me and my one cousin, and then when he got engaged, he came and he told everybody at Thanksgiving, right? And the whole night at Thanksgiving, there were different family members, the older like aunts and grandmas and all that stuff. And they're like, don't worry, it will happen for you too. And I was like, I don't think you realize that because he's getting married doesn't mean that I can't get married. It was like this whole thing. It was cracking me up. But at the same time, I was like, if I had like lesser faith in myself or self-love, I could have easily went home crying because of what was trying to be instilled. I'm sure in their minds are like, oh, it's okay. But that can be really hard to receive when you're like taking it all day long. And then I just remember thinking, his engagement doesn't take away from mine. And I know that's a stupid example, but that is how it plays out. And you're like, what the heck? We don't live in a world where we're limited. We are unlimited and we can have it all.
Yeah. And, even you sharing that, it did kind of remind me. I was like, oh, yeah, Lauren, remember that jealousy stuff does pop up for you. And not in the sense of, again, getting stuck in it, but in the sense of I do kind of have to consciously remind myself of that mindset that you're talking about. Like, there is that moment of, oh man, I want that. And it's interesting because even reading in like Conversations with God, the series, I forget which book, but they talk about actually, jealousy is this emotion. Like, you don't need to be afraid of that. You know what I mean? It's just communicating something to you. And maybe it's envy. It's one of them where they're like, one of them is healthy, one of them is not, but that sense of it's just communicating that you want that too. And that's where, again, you could kind of go in that sense of that more karmic for, oh my God, you got it. And that means there's not going to be any more for me. Right. Versus being able to be like, oh, wow, I felt something there that's telling me I want this too. But I can celebrate you and be happy for you because actually what this is showing me is that I am in a field of energy where that is flowing to my community. That's flowing in my direction. And I just need to believe in divine timing and have patience and recognize that because it's flowing to you, it's actually more likely to flow to me because we're in the same community. We're in the same network. We are having the same wavelength. So it's like, oh, cool. I'm actually getting closer because you got that. And if you can switch your perception rather than, again, oh no, you got it. Now I can't. Oh, you got it. That means it's one step closer to me.
That's so funny. I love it because it's so true. Now, Leigh,
Yeah.
let's talk about that kid aspect, shall we? You and I both have children.
Yeah. Yes.
And so with this 4 frequency, we know that it brings in, you're either fertile as a woman, you're either well, I
Mhm.
guess man too, you're either fertile mortal, what if there's a term for that for a man, or you may have difficulty conceiving, right? It's kind of like one end of the spectrum into the
Yeah.
other. And so I'll say for me, it was like I think I blinked and it was immediate with my daughter. There was no no, it flew my way. What was your journey like?
Same. I was in my early 30s, and it's like my biological clock said it's now. I want babies. We tried, and I got 2 amazing babies.
Oh.
They're only 18 months apart. So, and it was like
Ooh.
boom, boom, and it's like that is exactly. And I know what a gift that is. I really do.
Right.
I was like, surrounded by a lot of mom friends and mom community that their journey was difficult. And so I don't take that for granted at all. I know it's like such a gift to be able to conceive and have easy, healthy pregnancies all the way through to delivery. So, interestingly enough, both of my boys have karmic 4s in the same position as me.
Oh.
So when I saw that, I was like, wow, we're really working on this one in this lifetime.
Well, right, because
Yes.
we do generally see that children come in needing to clear out things that we as their parents are still working
Yeah.
through. And so the beauty of that is you see that, and you as a conscious parent, you're like, oh, I really need to get my shit together so my child doesn't have to suffer or go
Yeah.
through the challenge aspect as much as we do, right?
Hmm.
Or so I love that because my daughter, she's got karmic 6s and I've got karmic 6s, and
Hmm.
it cracks me up because that's exactly how it shows up,
Yeah.
but then you'll also see people who have a lot of trouble conceiving, maybe
Mm.
never conceive. Or I also do see people who are like, I never want kids. And they
Mm.
have that beautiful 4 frequency in their chart. And I'm like, I get it. Like,
Yeah.
and kids is not for everybody.
Right.
But along with that kid element, when you do have that child, one or multiple of your children may be those button pushers.
Hmm.
And so my daughter, from the moment she was born, she lives in her 6s, so she's very like stubborn, very strong-willed, very like defiant is not the word because she's just beautiful and magical, but like she knows what she wants when she wants it, and that's when she's gonna get it. Right? She's like what you want your like 23-year-old daughter to be, not your 3-year-old daughter to be. So my daughter, she is that button pusher in the sense where she's always like, mama, 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 and she wants my attention. Now, if I was less self-aware, I'd be like, oh my God, this kid's driving me nuts. But I realize that why in the world would I not stop and give her that attention she needs? Because in a few years, she's going to be like, I'm out of here, lady, like leave me alone kind of thing. But
Hmm.
it's very much the children in our lives, especially those little button pushers, whoever that child may be for you, is actually meant to be our greatest source of unconditional love. Right.
Mhm.
So Leigh, do either of your boys, are they ever like, mommy,
Yeah.
mommy, mommy? Yeah.
Yeah. My youngest one is like the lack, there's not enough mommy. And
Right.
he's I call him, he's velcroed to me, and he's 7 now. So especially in his early years, I mean, it was just he wanted to be with me and only me. And it was like I have to be conscious that I'm not favoring him with
Mm.
both of my boys. So that's something I really stepped into, that like there's plenty of mommy and I love you both and we're good. And so it's like allowing him to kind of lean into some independence there. But yeah, that totally shows up.
Isn't it so funny how like that is associated with a specific frequency that
Yeah.
one kid will be it
Yeah.
cracks me up. Now I only have one, so all of my favor goes to her,
Yeah.
but I can't even imagine how difficult it could be finding that balance, especially when one kid is way more needy or
Yeah.
wanting of your time or an attention than another.
He has like 4 4s in his chart. And so more I'm like, okay, this is dominant for him, of course. And the lessons that I can easily share with him, okay, let's be grateful for, because it's like he'll get the new toy, and then it's like he makes it invisible and wants something else. And so we practice like, let's be grateful for the item you literally have in your hand right now. And so it's easy for me to share the like the empowerment tools for him, and then I go, oh yeah, this is for me too, right? So
Right.
teaching through our children is for us as well.
Right, because there is that,
Especially with this number, right?
yes, because
Especially.
so there is that belief energy of in other lifetimes you've been selfish with your money and your knowledge and everything you've had. And so these beautiful little children are into your life to get you out of that selfishness. It's not about you anymore.
Right.
Now you've got to give unconditionally to this other little beautiful creature, human, who will in turn give you the most unbelievable unconditional love.
Yeah.
And what is interesting with this number is that, right, like you're talking about sometimes, and they can be accidental children, like you were talking about, sometimes people don't want kids, and then sometimes it's like these kids show up because that's the lesson on a soul level you're wanting to learn, even if consciously you're like, I don't know. Because especially you see that, especially when there are those people who are having that difficulty of sharing with themselves, right? Because that's what kids will demand of you. And so sometimes what we see is that that child is able to kind of teach you that lesson on a general sense, right? And that you can change that aspect of yourself as the parent. And sometimes what just happens is that for the parent, where it's like their bubble was just them, right? That's what they're caring about, is them and their bubble, and their child just kind of comes into that bubble. And so, yeah, they can care about their child, but it's still kind of like, it's still my bubble against the world. It's just that now my child is in my bubble. So it's interesting, you always see people sometimes can be really leaning into lessons, and sometimes it's resisting. And I think that can show up with people who have this for, and their children, they're kind of learning to extend themselves, but it's like only just at one level, right? And they're not kind of opening it up to that more general community and just collective. It's still like me and my bubble. It's just that my bubble has my children in it.
The funny part is that 13-4 is generally someone who doesn't want anything to do with other people's kids either, right? So I'll give an example. When I didn't change my name right away when I got married, but I did eventually. I changed my last name, and it brought in that 13-4. Do I not have that chart up? Anyway, it brought in the 13-4. I was trying to find the placement, but it brought in a lot of fours. But I remember I had reached a point where all of a sudden, and I've loved children from the day I was born. I was like 12 years old praying to God for like a child, like that's who I was. And then my mom had 2 boys, so I guess I got the child, because then I raised them as my own. Like in my mind, they were my boys. Anyway, I at some point after changing my name, and again, I didn't know the frequencies at that time, I had gotten to a point where I was like, I can't be around other people's kids anymore. And I remember being like, that is wild, because that's not who I am. It's the opposite of who I am. And there was this short period where I was like, I can't take the noise. I'm so done with this. I'm burnt out. And so that is when I started to shift. It was maybe like a year or so after that where I shifted that I'm done with this business, because hello, I had a daycare business. You have to love the kids. You have to like deal with all the noise and kids screaming and being loud and all over the place. My entire life never bothered me until that it was like the 6-month period where I was like, I need a break. But I'm grateful for it because it has led me to where I am today. But that 13-4, you don't value that. You don't really understand that unless you're somebody who's in the daycare business. And all of a sudden you're like, I need a break from kids, but your life and your whole world is kids. It was like cracking me up. But it's one of those where, as nurturing and mothering and loving as that frequency is, it can get really annoyed with other people's kids. And I just think it's another one of those where you're like, how odd that this is even a thing, but it's a thing. And I feel it because it's played out in my life. I now love people's kids now again. so I can be around all types of kids. But as we say, when you change your name, when you optimize your name or you get married, you're bringing in these frequencies that a lot of people are just not aware of. And so so when you do that, you're going to feel that challenge aspect for a bit in the beginning. And that's what I was experiencing, that challenge aspect of that 13-4 that's like, I need to sit in my selfishness. That's really what it was. I need to sit in my selfishness. And then that challenge goes away and you step into the gift and the beauty of those frequencies, which, thank you God, I'm back in, because that was a challenging time. But anyway, I'm digressing a little bit, I think.
Well, it's interesting because we so often view selfishness as this negative, right? And yet at the same time, there are numbers that need to be taught to think about and put themselves first. And so it's just important to remember, like, everything in balance, right? Like, the selfishness can go way to the extreme, and that's where you want to address it. But there are some numbers that actually need a little bit of that to be boosted into their chart so that they pour into their own cup, and that they're not, that they learn to actually think about themselves and what do they need, instead of like, I'm the last on my priority list, right? So there's actually something to be said of sometimes that 4 energy of like really being in yourself can be really, really positive, and something we don't always do enough of in our society.
Yeah. Let's talk about some beautiful gifts of the 4. Anybody?
Well, I would actually love to tell a story that happened to me earlier this year. And it was in January. So my birthday's in March. It was before I officially had my 4-year, but I was in a 3-year. And it had to do with the job that I was in. And it has to do with these taking of risks. And I had not been happy in that job since basically I had started it. And yet I was like, this is where I need to be to make income so I can work on growing my business. And in January of this year, there was that, I forget if it was full moon or new moon. I'm in Leo, whichever one it was. And I just hadn't slept. I decided to take, day off work because I just had not slept at all. And I started, like, my channeling abilities opened up. I had so much stuff that was energy moving through and flowing through. And I was just like releasing all this energy. It was beautiful. And I ended up taking Thursday, Friday off. Naturally, I have Monday off. So I basically had a 5-day weekend, and I worked on my business. And I was like, okay, I'm really committed. Within the next few months, I want to bring my hours, my work schedule down to 2 days a week, so I have more time for my business. And I went into work on Monday or on Tuesday, and I get there before everybody else, by like an hour. So I'm alone in the office. And yet as soon as I walk in, I'm feeling kind of like hot and clammy. I'm sitting down at the computer. I'm reading messages that I missed when I was gone. And I'm just like, oh my God, I can't believe I have to deal with this again. I do not want to be here. I do not want to deal with this. And I was feeling so sick, like physically ill, to the point that I like texted a coworker and be like, I'm so sorry, I have to go home again. I'm just like not well enough to be here. And that was like within 20 minutes of being back at the office. And then within 20 minutes of being home, Spirit is telling me, you're done. You're just not going back. I was like, what? They're like, you're done. I was like, no. You mean I need to just go to 2 days a week? They're like, no, you're done. And I was like, but I need income. This is not the plan. This is not how it's going to work. They were like, you are never going to grow your business if you stay here, because this takes so much of your energy. You are so exhausted. It's never going to happen. You are done. And I was like a 2-week notice, right? They're like, nope, you're not going back. And, again, there was like a 10-20 minute going back and forth with my guides and my team of like, what do you mean? This is crazy. I can't do that. Right. What's the next step? This is irresponsible. Oh my God, I couldn't do that. And they're like, okay, how much money do you have in the bank? How long could you go with making no income if you had to? And I was like, okay, like 5 to 6 months. They're like, do you trust that like the situation can be different in that time? And I was like, I do trust that. They're like, okay, like, just generally, do you trust us that we are telling you to do this? And I was like, okay, I trust you. And, I sat with this for a little while. And then pretty quickly, I started to tell everybody in my life, except for my mom, because I was like too scared to tell her yet, but I was quitting. So I was like, I can't, when this rush goes off, I can't then go back. It'll be so easy to just go back on it.
Right.
This is how I have to be committed, by like telling
Everybody.
friends, everyone, hey, I'm quitting my job. That's been stressing me out. And they're like, yay, congratulations. And, let me tell you, it was scary, but things started to flow, right? I had the idea. I had gone back to work on the 30th. The 31st is when I called my boss and officially quit. So, right, I was in a 30-year, a 3-year, and a 4-year. And I was like, I was paying attention to those numbers. I was like, I know that this is significant. I get it. They're like, trust, 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 trust.
Mm.
Things can show up, things can flow. And they did, even in February, things started to flow. I mean, talking about the podcast, when Yiannah and I first kind of just touched base on Instagram, I was still at my job and I was thinking like, okay, let's talk about it. But like, I probably won't have time to do this till June. By the time we talked in the first week of February, I had quit and it was full steam ahead. So if I had not done that, you probably wouldn't even be listening to this right now.
Aw, so amazing.
So
That's a good
crazy.
story.
Yeah. One thing too that we need to discuss about this frequency is that teacher energy,
Mhm.
right? So the fours have this gift of being able to take on information or concepts and duplicate them and share them in the same exact way. And actually my one good friend who's got those karmic fours, one of her gifts is exactly that. The way she can remember and share back things exactly how she learned it is insane. Like I look at that and I'm like in awe of it because I'm not quite there. Right. And I think that's part of my memory that fails me, which I do have to stop telling myself that. But the way like these true fours can actually share information and they have this drive and this need and this desire to share it. And it's exactly how they've learned it each time. And they just keep duplicating. So it is this beautiful, doesn't mean you're going to be a teacher in a classroom, but we teach all the time. What we're doing right now, we're having this conversation about frequencies. We're actually teaching, right? And so when you have a lot of this teacher energy, you probably, if you think back to conversations you have even with your girlfriends and you're out to like lunch or dinner, how many times do you actually sit in that, do you wear that teacher hat where you don't even realize that that's happening, but that's exactly what's going on. And I know for me, at least, it's like all the time. Like I feel it all the time and I do my best to like take it off, but they're like, no, 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 but I need to know this thing. And I'm like, oh, here it goes again.
Yeah. I do relate to that for memory, good memory. My whole life, I've been known for like the one with the good memory, and like years later, bring up a story, and they're like, "How do you remember that?" Or just like you have a conversation with someone, and they tell you when their birthday is, and then like months later, it's like, "Hey, happy birthday!" How? What? I'm like, you told me that one time. I always say to people, I'm like, don't tell me something you don't want me to remember, because
Right.
I will.
Mm.
And I also say, that I'm a parrot, right? Like it's so hard when you were in school and it was like, put it into your own words. I'm like, but they said it so well. Like, let me just say that. And, from the beginning, actually, of my journey as of a soul contract reader, my friends were like, you really know what you're talking about. Like, you really sound like you know what you're talking about. I'm like, well, I learned from someone with 30 years of experience and I'm repeating it back. And so now I sound like I have 30 years of experience.
It's like a big transmission, though, when you're talking about the knowledge coming in. It's more than just being attentive in the classroom, right? It's like this ability to really let the energy and the transmission of knowledge infuse. And then we do, like, I hadn't thought about it before you ladies are mentioning it, but the ability to reflect it back as we learned, um, it makes the channel very clear.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And then there was one other thing that I just wanted to touch on and like validate too. The selfish part, for me, it shows up. I'm going to be selfish with who I surround myself with
Mm.
because we're so sensitive. It's like, no, I don't want to let my energy drain on low
Yeah.
vibration situations, people, places, things, right? And so I am selfish with who I hang out with or spend my time with because I've learned the hard way and it's just not worth it. So I will fully admit that I'm selfish with myself in that way.
Amen, girlfriend. I love that. No, but I think that is very, very important. And I think it's something that people just don't even realize
Mhm.
it's happening or you can do. And you have every right to be selective with who you surround yourself with, even if that's family. And that's really hard to do. But you
Yeah.
know what? You don't have to cut them off, but create those boundaries, create that when we're in a family event, I'm going to be in that space. And outside of that, I have to just keep and protect my space for it to be positive and uplifting and healthy, and cut off from that negativity, because I'm sure you've realized so many, and which is why you've had to do this. Same for me.
Mhm.
So many people get stuck in that negativity.
Yeah.
And as a feeler and somebody who absorbs people energy and feels that their energy, I also don't want to be in a low vibration because of the conversation or just them being physically near you, right? Have you, like, people walk into a room and you're like, oh, I need to steer clear from that. And it's
Yeah, you
not,
feel it.
yeah, and
Mhm.
it's not a judgment, or, no one's better than anyone else, but
Right.
sometimes we just carry this negativity. It's like dirt when somebody touches you. It's energetically there, and you're
Yeah.
wearing it like it's your own. And you're like, I can't be in that mind space anymore.
Mhm.
And so I have to shift the things in my life that are going to work for me. And so that is a beautiful aspect of that. And I think that's more self-worth than I think it is selfishness, right?
Mm.
Because I have to put myself first in the most loving way possible. It's not meant to hurt you or anything like that. But if you don't prioritize yourself, no one else is going to prioritize you.
Right.
Nobody.
Yeah. Like you said, the thoughts, right? It's like, oh, now my thoughts are low. And that immediately plummets into this experience of lack. Like
Yes.
I've rolled through that too many times. And it's like I'm finally wise to be like, oof, I don't I have to be mindful to not let my thoughts drop, because then it starts the negativity and lack loop. And it matters. I don't want to revisit that often.
Right?
And I what is coming to me, Yana, from you sharing this is the sense of where do we get our self-worth, right? Like I know for myself, like I was dyslexic, like I had a learning disability in elementary school, and I started to do really well academically in middle school. So from middle school all the way on, so much of my self-worth came from my academic performance. And, for some people, they might be getting their self worth through their athletic ability or, whatever that might be. And then when that maybe goes away, it's sort of like, oh my God, this is where I built my entire self worth around. And so, in the example that you were kind of sharing, it sort of made me think that for some of us, we think that our worthiness is what we are able to give or provide or to help others. And if we're not doing that, then we're not worth anything. And so that's where you tend, that 8 energy, especially, right? You want to give and give and give, because it's like maybe subconsciously and maybe even kind of consciously, possibly, that's where you're building your sense of self-worth from. And
Because that's where
so,
you're getting that reward you're receiving from
right.
someone,
Yeah.
place, or thing. Yeah.
And so it's like sometimes it's just about being able to retrain yourself to recognize that you are worthy regardless. You don't have to give anything to anyone, and you are inherently internally worthy. You could get terrible grades and you are inherently internally worthy, whatever it is, to be able to say you've built your self-worth around that, but you don't need that to be worthy. You exist and you are worthy.
Yeah. And so that all comes from that self-worth really needs to be built on the foundation of you and source, right?
Yeah,
You
just
can't
pure existence, I would say.
totally. So it's like, I will say, even like for as a mother, right, Leigh, I'm sure you can relate when you share with your sons. It's like, I had a mentor who said to me years ago, she was talking about her relationship with her daughter. And she says, I never say to her, I am so proud of you. What she says is, aren't you, for accomplishing, right? Aren't you so proud of yourself? And
Mm.
she goes, I directed back to her to know she doesn't need my
Mm.
approval to feel like she did something good. She needs to feel good because she did it for herself. Right. And so I
Beautiful.
remember when she said that, this like bell went off, and I was like, oh my God, you magical creature. I need you in my life, because her wisdom is just exceptional. And so I do that with my daughter.
Mm.
I make sure that, because there's times where I just want to be like, I'm so proud of you, or I'm so happy for you, or whatever. And I will rephrase it to where she understands that obviously I am all those things, but it's because she should feel that, because she did that. She accomplished building a tower of magnet house, whatever it is, you know?
Yeah.
But that
Empowerment, right? We're here to
absolutely,
empower. Yeah. And then
yeah,
they're more confident. That's beautiful.
it is. It's like my parents, my mother, she did an excellent job. She was an amazing mother, a single mother, okay? But she never taught me that part. That was never a conversation because she just wasn't conscious of it either. You know, it's not like she did anything wrong. So the beauty of stepping into your own spiritual growth and following your path is now you can help your children at a very early age
Mm.
learn and understand these concepts so they don't have to struggle like we did. They can step into that self-worth from 3 years old. If I can show you the self-worth of this little girl, my God, you couldn't break it with like a sledgehammer. She's just like, I know who I am, and she like doesn't like falter for anybody. But and so I want to make sure to keep nurturing that because it is all learned. It's environmentally learned, right? Am I saying that correctly? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
From our environment, our culture, our upbringing, everything impacts that. So the more we can bring that self-awareness to ourselves, the more we could pass it on to other people, especially our children.
Beautiful. Leigh, do you
Yeah.
have any final thoughts, any final words of wisdom to leave us with today?
Oh gosh, just I think the biggest thing with the 4 for me is follow your heart, let it flow, and the trust piece, right? Trust
Mhm.
and to be around people that uplift you.
Yeah.
I think that really matters in keeping your vibration high so that you can stay afloat and trust the process and really just enjoying all of it. You know, the parts that show us the contrast are always these little wisdom nuggets. And I really truly enjoyed my time with you both. It was such an amazing conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate you so much. Why don't you let our listeners know where they can find you?
You can find me on my website, ascensionalchemy.co. And on Instagram, I'm Ascension Alchemy 7.
Awesome. And
you do see some clients in person as well, correct?
I do, yes, my massage therapy practice as well as energetic work and occasionally readings are all in person in Lafayette, Colorado.
Yeah, so
nice.
absolutely reach out if you're in that area. And everyone, let us know what you thought of the 4 energy today. Join in on the conversation on Instagram. Let's Talk Vibes podcast. Do you have 4s in your chart? How do they show up for you? Is it that child, that button pressing child? Is it that faith? Is it the trust? And if you need to have your chart calculated, or if you'd like to book a reading with Yiannah or myself, head over to our website, theltvpodcast.com.
And as always, everybody, don't forget to like, share, subscribe to our content. It is the best way to support us, and we appreciate it so much. Have a beautiful, blessed day. Bye.
Bye.